South African-born Elon Musk, of course, the biggest name in science and technology. Like-minded innovators here at home in South Africa are wanting to follow his lead and leave the country. In fact, so far, many are registering their businesses over in the US in order to access international investments. This has now prompted a group of concerned technology entrepreneurs to propose what they're calling a Startup Act. Well, let's get more from SAP Africa's Sunil joining us this morning. Sunil, good to have you on the show. What exactly would a Startup Act actually look like?
Well, thank you very much for having us on the show this morning, Karen. Look, the Startup Act, in terms of its framework, should include enabling factors for these individuals, organizations that are looking out there to get into the space of technology, able to deliver on their mandates. And if you look at the United States right now and the movement that's happening there, a number of startups actually fail because they don't read the market well enough. That's the first thing. The second thing is they run out of funding. And we know that about 90% of startups fail in the first year. So the act that is put in place needs to take into account some of the challenges that entrepreneurs who are driving startups are able to put in place. Just looking at the latest Embroker Startup Statistic white paper, we note a couple of things and why the US remains an attractive destination, and there's learning for us out of it. The US has had almost a 47% increase in startups over the last decade. And then if you extend it further to look at the largest tech market in the world, again, the US pops up with about $1.8 trillion. And typically, the tech startups are developing in areas of blockchain, robotics, artificial intelligence, big data, agricultural technology as well. Now, in terms of putting together an act to support technology startups, of course, there are startups in every field of industry. We know that the fourth industrial revolution is upon us, and all of these industries have to sort of migrate towards it. And then if we look further into the United States, and using it as an exemplar again, fintech funding jumped a new record of about $131.5 billion, and we're looking across 5,000 deals. Now, that's where the learnings come in. And essentially, the act should also, in some way, create an enabling environment for entrepreneurs and startups to access funding. Because besides reading the market incorrectly, there's also the issue of funding. And at the moment, there are frameworks within South Africa for funding from your venture capitalists. But these remain a very exclusive capacity within South Africa, and the opportunities are also limited for entrepreneurs.
Well, I was about to ask you, Sunil, I was about to ask you exactly that, the barrier to entry on something like this as well, because on doing a little bit of reading about this, the Americans, the US, are very happy to take our good ideas, our tech startups, fintechs, all of those, and bring them over to the US, and they make access very, very easy for them. So we're losing those in South Africa who've managed to create a good startup after years of trying and getting the funding. But the problem is the access for those who want to start out. And just the last question I have for you, how does that work? What do we do practically as of today, whether it's with government, the private sector, startups, entrepreneurs, to try and get that going so we can stop South Africans going over to the US? How do we make it better and easier and more accessible for them here? Last question briefly.
I'll reverse the question. Do we want to stop them from going overseas and having bigger addressable market? I get your question, Garrett, and I'll say the following. Enabling environment, the environment around data, cloud is a big thing right now for tech entrepreneurs. The legislation around that needs to be finalized. Then in terms of existing multinationals, they need to extend further what they're doing. SAP began as a startup 50 years ago and is doing a lot of work in terms of enabling startups, typically through the startup guide, additionally to some of the subset organizations that we have, such as SAP IO and Sapphire. So the big corporates and the multinationals need to put the shoulder to the wheel in terms of the private sector. The government needs to create an enabling environment to allow entrepreneurs to do what they do best. And let's not forget the growing and burgeoning arena of social enterprises. I think that is where a lot of development is going to come out into the future, and we need to focus on those areas.
Well, I really appreciate it, and you make some very good points. Going to keep a close eye on the Startup Act, this proposition that's been put forward to try and help all entrepreneurs, startups, fintechs, any kind of technology experts to get into the field of startups as well and stay there. There's nothing wrong with going overseas, but we need to try and keep as many people here as we can and try and create an environment where they can grow. My thanks to Global Government Affairs, CSR and Sustainability Director Sunil Guinness joining us from SAP Africa.